Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Maya Trabulsi, and thank you for joining us. We begin our program tonight with a warning from local community groups and elected leaders about federal budget cuts. They're urging San Diego's congressional delegation to oppose the spending plan being championed by the Trump administration and Republicans in Congress. KPBS reporter John Carroll explains activists and county officials are characterizing the budget proposal as disastrous for working people and seniors.
It is a vote on a budget that will take us down a dark and sinister path that will line the pockets of billionaires at the expense of everyday people.
That verbal gauntlet thrown down this morning by Alliance San Diego's Andrea Guerrero. This news conference at the County Administration Building was one of 3 held this morning, the others in Bakersfield and Anaheim. Community groups and elected officials coming together with a clear message for their members of Congress.
It is an immoral piece of legislation that would make devastating cuts to the programs that working families, seniors, and young people in San Diego County rely on every single day.
The demand that San Diego's congressional delegation oppose the proposed budget was directed at all 5 members, but the delegation's lone Republican, Representative Darrell Issa, was singled out for special attention by one of his constituents.
This is a message to all of San Diego's congressional representatives, especially Congressman Issa. Will you stand? Where will you stand? Will you defend Medicaid, food aid, and student assistance? Or will you make it even harder for people to afford to live here and contribute to our San Diego economy?
This morning's news conference with its pleas and demands of elected officials was followed by another one later in the morning inside. That one featured a warning.
Over $1.3 billion in our county budget is funded through federal sources. Right now, Trump administration directives are already disrupting our operations, and the purpose of this federal affairs briefing is to inform the public regarding the specifics.
Supervisor Tara Lawson-Remer went on to tick off a whole litany of issues she says are either happening or will happen if federal dollars coming back to San Diego are cut. They include funding for disaster relief, for shelter and other services to get people off the street, public health funding, money for environmental issues, including the cleanup of the Tijuana River sewage crisis. The list goes on, but the message is clear. Whether it's through executive orders or a slashed federal budget, these community activists and elected leaders say San Diego County residents who aren't millionaires or billionaires will pay the price. John Carroll, KPBS News.
What did you do last week? That question, emailed to every federal employee, ignited a firestorm. Elon Musk fueled the flames by posting on X the potentially dire consequences of not responding. As Laura Aguirre reports, it's not just Democrats and federal workers pushing back this time.
It's just chaos.
This Seattle-based TSA agent is speaking out anonymously, fearing reprisals. One of hundreds of thousands of federal employees who received this email from the Office of Personnel Management, demanding that they reply with 5 job accomplishments from the past week by midnight. Or, as Elon Musk posted on X soon after, failure to respond would be considered a resignation.
And you're not going to get unemployment, because if it's a resignation, then you can't apply for unemployment.
The Saturday email sparked confusion through several chains of command. Leaders at multiple federal agencies directing their staffers not to reply, pending further guidance, hinting of a potential authority rift between newly confirmed agency chiefs and Musk. President Donald Trump weighing in today during an Oval Office sit-down with the French president.
If you don't answer, like you're sort of semi-fired or you're fired, because a lot of people are not answering because they don't even exist.
This is a violation of labor contracts, labor law.
A group of federal unions filed an updated legal challenge in California Sunday to include the OPM emails demand, in addition to their previous filings related to the mass firing of workers. A hearing on that temporary restraining order is set for Thursday. The Transportation Department did order its employees to respond by OPM's deadline, including the FAA's air traffic controllers, many who, union leaders say, are working mandatory overtime 6 days a week. I'm Laura Aguirre for KPBS News.
Governor Gavin Newsom says more accountability is needed in how the state deals with homelessness, and that's the intent behind a new website that was launched today. Newsom says accountability.ca.gov will allow people to see the results of state funding in an easy-to-read way. Color-coded information for each county signals whether local governments are making progress or falling behind. Governor Newsom highlighted some of the numbers from San Diego County during his presentation.
You can see San Diego County struggling a little bit more. By contrast, last year, you can see the red in this case. Their unsheltered population going up, their number of shelter beds going down, total number of people experiencing homelessness going up.
Governor Newsom also discussed public safety, saying it will play a role in future spending. Cities and counties could see reduced investment if progress isn't made on clearing encampments. The city of San Diego will receive $25 million to address homelessness in a new round of state funding announced today.
Largely quiet as we head through tonight in our area. Temperatures in the lower 50s, maybe just a few clouds towards the coast, but that's fairly limited as offshore flow continues. And we'll be talking about a warm up still to come.
Pope Francis remains in critical condition, but today the Vatican announced his condition has improved slightly. The update came a day after the Vatican said blood tests showed mild signs of kidney failure. But today's statement said the kidney issues are not a cause for concern. The 88-year-old pontiff also resumed some work this afternoon from the hospital. Our media partner KGTV spoke to a retired priest at University of San Diego who says Catholics are praying for the Pope's recovery.
He's been a tremendous inspiration to all of us, not just the Catholic world, but I think a voice of mercy and justice and compassion for everyone. And so I think we're all watching very intensely to see how he's doing.
Francis has now been hospitalized since February 14th when he was admitted for respiratory issues. A federal judge partially paused the Trump administration's new policy allowing immigration enforcement at some places of worship. It's the first ruling considering the policy's legality. The temporary order is a narrow victory for the religious organizations that brought the lawsuit. They included congregations of Quakers, Baptists, and Sikhs, but the judge declined to pause the policy nationwide. In 2021, San Diego became the first border county in the nation to offer free legal representation for people in immigration court. KPBS border reporter Gustavo Solis says the program has helped hundreds of people avoid deportation.
In 2023, a woman identified only as Miss R, who had already been deported twice, was about to be deported for a third time. She was being held at the Otay Mesa Detention Center, and that's where a lawyer from San Diego County's Immigrant Legal Defense Program looked over her case. And the lawyer discovered that the woman had been a U.S. citizen since 1982.
The U.S. government had messed up, made a clerical error on their paperwork, and they were a U.S. citizen.
That's County Supervisor Tara Lawson-Reamer. She created the Legal Defense Program to protect people like Miss R, who are facing deportation without an attorney.
And this, to me, is such a perfect example of why you need to ensure due process and that the Constitution is followed. So you could have a U.S. citizen being deported.
To qualify for the program, people have to be physically detained at the Otay Mesa Detention Center or on some kind of monitored release program. Lawson-Reamer says this program addresses systematic injustices in immigration court.
And in immigration court, even though you have a legal right to counsel, it's a right in theory because there's no attorneys provided. And so you could show up in immigration court and not have an attorney. You don't understand what the law is. You don't know what you've been charged with.
And that means some people get deported not because of the strength of their argument or the quality of their evidence, but because they simply do not understand our complex immigration laws. And data from the immigration court system bears this out. Last year, 85% of people without lawyers got deportation orders, but only 14% of people with lawyers got the same outcome. Showing up in court without a lawyer puts a defendant at a significant disadvantage. So says Paulina Reyes-Berariz, a lawyer with the Immigrant Defenders Law Center.
Maybe they missed something in their story that would have been helpful to highlight in their asylum claim, perhaps that they thought it wasn't important at the time, or were able to also connect them with health services, mental health services, a medical evaluation to really document perhaps the scars that they had on their bodies, something that they would not have shown in front of a judge.
Reyes-Berariz says the program is more important than ever now that Donald Trump is back in the White House and promising an unprecedented mass deportation operation.
So if we see more, perhaps, expedited removals or ICE raids within our community, we're able to use this program for anyone that might need an attorney, especially if it's going to be longtime citizens or residents here in San Diego County.
Now, the program is not without controversy. The County Board of Supervisors approved it in 2021 on a 3-2 vote, with Democrats voting in favor and Republicans in opposition. At the time, Supervisor Jim Desmond said,
"To me, this is a federal issue, and unfortunately, not the financial responsibility of a local county government."
In 2023, Supervisor Joel Anderson tried to block people with criminal convictions from getting pro bono legal representation. That effort ultimately failed. The program cost taxpayers just over $4 million in its first 2 fiscal years. It is fully funded for the current fiscal year. Michael Garcia is the county's chief deputy public defender. He manages the program. More than 40 lawyers participate, but Garcia says that is still not enough to meet the demand.
In San Diego, there's a limited number of resources when it comes to immigration representation. There aren't that many lawyers. It's not like people aren't getting rich, doing immigration laws.
And these cases take a long time to make their way through the court system.
That creates a lot of challenges in, making sure that caseloads aren't too high, that our lawyers aren't overworked. It's part of the reason why I'm always kind of looking for lawyers.
Garcia says that without more lawyers, the program may have to limit the number of cases they assign. Lawson Reamer is already thinking of ways to expand the program.
Do we need to increase it, right? Like scale it up, especially given what we might see coming out of, or what we are seeing coming out of Washington. So there might be a need to increase the program.
And she might already be getting some help from Sacramento. Earlier this month, Governor Gavin Newsom signed a law that puts aside $25 million for legal groups to help them defend immigrants facing deportation. Gustavo Solis, KPBS News.
The source of a deadly Listeria outbreak that has sickened more than 24 and killed 11 people since 2018 has finally been discovered. The Food and Drug Administration says bacteria in frozen nutritional shakes is linked to the illnesses and deaths in 21 states, including here in California. Nearly 90% of those affected reported living in long-term care facilities or were hospitalized before becoming sick. The shakes, sold by the brands Lions, Ready Care, and Cisco Imperial, were sent to nursing homes, hospitals, and long-term care facilities. Symptoms can take weeks to show up.
They can range from simple gastroenteritis type symptoms, which is foodborne stomach infection, where we get nausea, we get vomiting. Sometimes it could present as back pain, and then also all the basic infectious symptoms, flu-like symptoms. Muscle aches and fatigue, chills, fever, inability to keep food down.
The FDA told the companies to stop selling and customers to stop serving the shakes on Friday. They say they are working with the CDC and local agencies to track the multi-state outbreak. So far, no San Diego County hospitals or nursing homes have reported cases linked to the recalled shakes. The trend of drinking raw, unpasteurized milk has grown on social media as Americans move toward eating less processed food. This as bird flu is impacting dairy herds across the U.S. Lee Waltman visited a dairy farm to see where and how the milk is collected.
With his cows brushed and milking equipment thoroughly cleaned,
we're ready to go.
Stephen Vincent is ready to begin milking his dairy cows at Brookby Farm in upstate New York. These specialized machines collect approximately 300 gallons of milk weekly. It's then cooled and bottled on site. He and his wife Jamie sell it directly to customers in the family farm store.
I just feel like people have gotten to a point where they want to get back to more natural way of living and eating.
In the past few months, they say they've personally seen the demand for raw milk skyrocket.
We have families that come get it in 5-gallon buckets.
As bird flu becomes a growing concern, impacting dairy herds in states including California and Nevada, the Vincents are back to COVID-era protocols. The barn isn't open to visitors. We had to wear protective foot coverings, and the windows were covered to keep birds out.
New York has started testing the milk for that.
Farmers in New York, like the Vincents, are required to have a specialized permit from the Department of Agriculture and Markets in order to sell raw milk to people. It requires the animals and milk to be tested regularly. But the Vincents wish there was a uniformed requirement for selling raw milk instead of varying from state to state.
Here, I have to sell it here on my farm. I cannot take it to a farmer's market to sell. Connecticut is 3 miles away. They can bottle it and sell it in a grocery store.
On the West Coast, Bethany McDaniel buys her raw milk from a larger operation, Raw Farm, which recently had a bird flu outbreak.
That gave me zero pause.
For 2 years, McDaniel has consumed raw milk on and off because she believes it has improved her dairy sensitivity, her children's immune system, and her gut health, though the FDA refutes all of those claims.
With proper standards in place, there's nothing dangerous or risky about it.
That's not the belief held by the majority of the medical community. Dr. Rabia Delator, a gastroenterologist, says prior to the required pasteurization of milk, up to 25% of foodborne illnesses came from it.
People were getting sick from drinking raw milk because the process of actually getting milk from a cow into an actual container for you to drink was fraught with different types of infectious sources.
Milk is pasteurized by applying high heat over a short period of time, which kills bacteria like E. coli, Listeria, and staph without removing nutrients found in milk. Delator warns against drinking raw milk and urges anyone interested to research the risks rather than believing what they see on social media.
If you blindly follow instructions that you see on social media or other sources where there's no liability, you could be hurting yourself or your loved ones, and so I wouldn't recommend that.
In New York, I'm Lee Waldman.
A measles outbreak is growing, now reported in 8 states, including California. West Texas is among the hot spots, with 90 cases confirmed since late January. Mandy Gaither has answers to some of the most common questions about measles.
It's one of the world's most contagious infectious diseases, and it's important to know the warning signs of measles. Early on, it can mimic a respiratory illness, causing a cough, red eyes, and extreme congestion. There may also be a high fever that may spike to more than 104 degrees. Typical measles cases also have a red splotchy rash that develops 3 to 5 days after symptoms start, and tiny white spots inside the mouth 2 to 3 days before symptoms begin. Experts say vaccination is the best protection.
For the vast majority of people, if you've gotten your measles shots, you should be protected. It should be something that works for life.
The vaccine is typically given to young children. Officials say the first dose, given between 12 and 15 months, is 93% effective against measles. The second dose, given around age 4 to 6, boosts that efficacy to 97%.
If you are living in an area where measles is circulating and you're worried about that, getting that second shot earlier is fine.
Despite the recent outbreak, experts say measles isn't becoming more severe. Before mass vaccinations, improvements in medical care were already lowering the death rate. However, before 1963, when vaccines weren't routinely given, there were between 400 and 500 people dying every year in the U.S. from measles. In 2015, there was 1 death, the most recent in the U.S. from the illness.
That's really what this vaccine is designed to prevent.
For Health Minute, I'm Mandy Gaither.
We have certainly turned things around from some of the cool and wet days so far this winter as we are getting close to approaching 90 degrees across parts of the area this week. So that'll be the first one on the board for 2025. Some coastal clouds likely as we head through tonight. Very limited, though, as the offshore flow continues, keeping things mild and eventually setting up the stage for record challenging highs as we work our way into the middle of the week. First up, though, tonight, 51 for the low in the city, 46 in Oceanside. We had to 44 in Ramona and 45 in Mount Laguna. Fairly quiet. And with no big activity going on, high pressure and control will keep things warm and dry across so much of the Southwest. So we may not be the only ones in our part of Southern California challenging some records as we go through this early week. Notice tomorrow we are at 71 for the high in San Diego. Escondido headed up to 80 degrees and Borrego Springs punching into the 90 territory here. And that may not be the end of it because we are talking more warm to come on Wednesday. Temperatures in the upper 70s for the coastal communities. Lots of sunshine out there with that offshore flow, keeping us dry. Also, with enough of a Santa Ana wind, there will be, of course, some very big differences there with the relative humidity. So it's going to be quite dry. Temperatures in the lower 90s for our inland communities on Wednesday, after the lower 80s tomorrow, which is still warm for us, and it stays hot into Thursday. So Wednesday and Thursday, the peak of the heat for a lot of us. Our highest numbers will come on Wednesday, but you can even see for mountain communities without much of that wind, we could actually top out Tuesday in the lower 60s before the wind kicks in, and it maybe makes it feel at least a little bit different out there. Desert communities punching in towards 90 degrees Tuesday, even into Wednesday. Once we get into Thursday, we're still up there. We're still hot. Maybe not quite as record challenging, but well above historical average there. So be ready for a pretty warm trend. We'll ease off of it into the late week. For KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Melissa Constanzer.
Over the weekend, dozens of people protested layoffs at Yosemite National Park. In all, an estimated 200,000 federal workers have been laid off as part of President Trump's overhaul of the federal government. Vince Ibarra spoke with one of those former workers at Yosemite.
People united will never be defeated. Dozens of people were protesting for the workers who were laid off in Yosemite National Park. They even flew the American flag upside down off El Capitan. 1,000 national park workers were told their job was terminated on February 14th. The day is now being called by some the Valentine's Day Massacre. This email was sent to Andrea Townsend, a specialist at Yosemite.
Attached to the email was a termination notice, basically outlining that I was still in my probationary period, meaning I had been in my specific position for less than 1 year, and that my skills and knowledge did not meet the current needs of the administration.
President Trump hasn't publicly made a comment on the cuts impacting national parks, but on Sunday, he posted a meme to his social media account appearing to mock the federal employees targeted by the Department of Government Efficiency's cuts. Townsend is confused about how she could be laid off when her role at the national park was funded through grant money.
It made me really angry. I work really hard at my job. I have 2 degrees. I studied fishers my entire life, and to tell me that I'm not meeting the standards of my job, yeah, like I said, it's the complete lie.
Townsend believes this is just a step towards privatizing public land. She says she's concerned about workers who are left to manage the national park.
They're just going to have to work now even harder to continue to provide the experience that visitors expect here in Yosemite and to protect the resources here in Yosemite.
Townsend says she's considering all options for getting her job reinstated, which includes an appeal through the Department of Interior National Park Service and a possible class action lawsuit.
A new children's book puts West African culture in the next generation's hands and ears. KPBS reporter Katie Hyson says the local author is passing it forward.
For centuries, African people have shared their histories through oral storytelling. And that's how J.P. Halesbaugh learned his. His dad read him West African folktales at bedtime.
Even when learning about some of the more tragic things in my lineage, it gave me a sense of dignity.
When Halesbaugh's friends started having kids, he wanted them to have that experience. So he wrote a children's book, Jawara's Journey. In it, a boy goes through the Basari manhood ritual and learns how so many generations of Africans in the diaspora have kept their traditions alive.
For, I think, African American kids specifically, it's critical that we understand our history doesn't start here. It doesn't start because we came here under duress. And it's important to know that we had a history before that and that we've retained it.
To Hales Baugh, it shows their heritage is not just tragedy, but extraordinary resilience. And that lesson matters. Some studies show Black children who learn about their heritage before slavery tend to have higher self-esteem and school performance. The book is keeping heritage alive in more ways than one. Through March, Hales Baugh will be donating the proceeds to fire relief in Altadena.
That was a safe haven for African Americans leaving the Jim Crow South. It's been a Black community in Los Angeles County for decades, and now that it's been destroyed, a lot of people there are concerned that big corporations might come in and buy large plots of land, or that people might be relocated, similar to what we saw in Louisiana with Katrina. So a lot of people we're all pulling together our resources to help keep that community what it's been.
Jawara's Journey is available on Amazon. Katie Hyson, KPBS News.
I'm Amna Navaz. Tonight on the News Hour, on the third anniversary of the war in Ukraine, the U.S. sides with Russia during a vote at the United Nations. That's coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
And here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow. In the KPBS newsroom, President Trump has vowed to halt funds set aside by the Biden administration to keep water flowing in the Colorado River. NPR's Morning Edition examines the implications for the tens of millions of people who rely on that river. And KPBS Midday Edition is checking in with an urgent care nurse for an update on the flu in San Diego County. And you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. From all of us here at KPBS, I'm Maya Trabulsi. Good night.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.